So today I'm joined once again by my colleague Mark. Mark, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
And today I'm going to be talking to Mark about the recently held COP28. However, before we come to COP28, Mark, and its outcomes, can you just give us a little bit of background? First of all, what is COP? Right. And secondly, what is essentially the purpose of it?
Right, yeah, so good. So COP originally stands for Conference of the Parties, and these are all the signatory countries who have signed up to this initiative, which is a United Nations initiative.
I see. And so when did it start and why? What was their primary focus?
So the primary focus is really on the environment, and recently it's focused more and more on CO2 reductions, and this will come up later, but so that means basically transitioning away from fossil fuels to renewable, particularly renewable energy.
Right. And what were some of the kind of key dates going back
in history?
Okay,
1992, and we started with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change.
Right.
Okay. This was talking about limiting the rise in temperature. So by 1995, countries had launched negotiations to strengthen the global response to climate change. It's fairly, as international measures go, this was actually quite quick. And of course, 1997, absolutely key, cornerstone, the Kyoto Protocol.
Right.
And it's kind of, it's really good that Japan really kicked it off, because Japan is so energy reliant. So actually recognizing what's going wrong and really making big efforts. So
I see.
Concrete targets were set.
Okay, so let's bring it forward then to the present day. And where was COP28 held firstly?
Okay, this fairly controversially was in Dubai, part of the United Arab Emirates.
Right. And why is that controversial?
Well, it's controversial first of all because it's a petro-state, but also the host gets to choose the president.
I see.
They chose the president, Dr. Al-Jabbar, and he actually is also head of the government's national oil company.
Okay, so there was a bit of a conflict of interest there.
I think definitely a conflict of interest, and everyone was really, really worried. I think they were really worried.
Okay. So then, can you just tell us maybe some of the key things that came up during the COP, some of the discussions that went on?
Well, there are a few really controversial things. First of all, Dr. Al-Jabbar was heard talking to Mary Robinson, former president of Ireland, all about how the science didn't back up a link between CO2 emissions and fossil fuels. Okay. However, he did then row back and said, of course, he agreed with the science. So that was kind of, you had to, have a very a very quick meeting. I guess the other really controversial thing was the number of oil company delegates.
How many were?
2,500.
Oh, wow.
Which was why it was controversial was because that's 7 times more than delegates from indigenous countries.
Of course, who are being affected by what's going on.
Yeah.
Right.
And also people weren't happy that so many delegates flew in on private jets.
A lot of emissions there then.
Massive. So basically one private jet passenger produces produces CO2, which is 11 times more than a commercial flight passenger. So you really are looking at.
There you go. Right.
Big heavy things. Yeah.
I see. And in terms of some of the eventual outcomes?
The eventual outcomes were actually pretty good.
Okay.
What you had was, so the draft communique, which is released beforehand, basically it was really widely criticized.
Oh dear.
Because there was no mention of phasing out fossil fuels. Okay. And of course, I think this goes back to a letter the president of OPEC sent round to other OPEC members saying we should not allow any mention of fossil fuels.
I see.
But just CO2 emissions.
Right.
So it went like that. So there was huge, several countries, the UK, the US, Spain, and of course the island nations, the Association of Island Nations. They said they wouldn't accept it. They wouldn't sign it.
I see.
So it was really.
So it was a bit of a stalemate at that stage.
Actually, my feeling is that Dubai did not want to have, they needed a signed document. They needed agreement, or else they would look really bad. Lose face. So they really rewrote it. They kind of, I think, went into reverse.
Okay.
So you've got mention of fossil fuels. You've got I mean, the other good thing to come out with this, you've got a lot of support for countries which are most affected, called the Loss and Damage Fund.
I see.
Which is basically, developed richer countries providing money to poorer developing countries who are most affected, and that was good.
Okay, that's a positive step
very
at least.
positive.
Yeah,
so there are kind of two positive steps. For the first time, you've got fossil fuel mentioned directly. So instead of CO2 emissions, which is good. However, it only covers fossil fuels for energy.
Right.
It doesn't do it for agriculture, for plastics, and for transportation as well.
Which are all, I mean, huge contributors.
Particularly transportation.
Right. Okay. So, in summary, are you feeling optimistic about how they'll proceed with some of the policies outlined?
I am. I think the loss and damage was a huge step forward, and getting fossil fuels actually into the final agreement, even if it's very limited to just energy rather than the other sectors, I think that's a start, because once it's mentioned in one COP communique, it can't be dropped next time.
I see.
And that's really important.
And next time, they've already decided the venue for COP29?
Yes. Azerbaijan. A little worrying because it's a petro-state again. It relies on oil, exporting oil, basically.
Right. Well, let's see, and let's at least hope that they can stick to some of the positive policies that they've outlined, and hopefully we'll see some improvements over the coming year and beyond.
I think so. I think basically all countries are missing their targets. So there's hope that this will kind of re-energize their efforts. That's what I'm really hoping.
Fingers crossed, yeah.
Definitely fingers crossed.
Well, thanks very much for outlining all that to us today, Mark. Thank you for your time. It's very interesting.
Yeah, my pleasure, Rob.
Sure. And this is just one of a number of our pieces of YouTube content that you can find on the Simul Academy channel. So hopefully, if you haven't seen it already, you can go back through our catalogue and enjoy some of our other previous discussions. So thanks very much for listening to us today, and we'll hopefully see you next time.
Yep, great. Thank you very much for joining us.